The colony of Nova Incheon sat on a small green moon at the edge of explored space. 40,000 people lived there. Farmers who had left Earth to grow rice under alien skies. Engineers building roads through purple forests. Children who ran through fields of tall grass that smelled like rain and copper. It was not a military base. It was not a fortress. It was a place where families ate dinner together and watched two suns set over the horizon every evening. Han Do-hyun was a captain then, stationed on a patrol ship 3 days away. He was 31 years old, the son of a fisherman from Busan, who had never seen the ocean on another world. He had joined the fleet because he believed humanity's future was out among the stars. He believed the galaxy was big enough for everyone. He was wrong. The Velhari Dominion controlled over 200 star systems. They were old, they were powerful, and they did not ask permission. When their star maps showed that Nova Incheon fell inside what they considered their territory, they did not send a message. They did not file a complaint. They did not negotiate. They simply sent a patrol fleet of 30 warships to remove the problem. The people of Nova Incheon saw the ships appear in the sky on a Tuesday morning. Some of them tried to send a distress signal. Some of them tried to run. Most of them just stood and looked up, because they had never seen warships before, and did not understand what was about to happen. The bombardment lasted 6 hours. The Velhari were not in a hurry. They burned the colony section by section, grid by grid, the way a person might clean a table. When they were finished, there was nothing left but black glass and smoke. 40,000 people, gone. Not a single building standing. Not a single voice on the radio. Do-hyun's ship received the distress signal 14 minutes after it was sent. By the time he arrived 3 days later, the smoke had cleared and the ground had cooled. He walked through the ruins with his boots crunching on glass that had once been soil. He did not speak. His crew followed behind him in silence. He found a child's shoe near what had been a school. It was small and red, half melted into the ground. He picked it up and held it in his hands for a long time. Then he put it in his pocket. He did not say a word for 3 days after that. When the news reached Earth, the planet went quiet. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of something breaking deep inside. Every screen on every continent showed the same footage. The blackened moon, the empty craters where homes had been. The list of names that scrolled and never seemed to end. People did not scream. They did not riot. They sat in their homes and stared at the screen, and something changed behind their eyes. A mother in Seoul turned off her television and held her daughter and said nothing. A factory worker in Lagos put down his tools and walked outside and looked up at the sky. A teacher in Sao Paulo canceled her class and sat at her desk with her hands folded and thought about the fact that somewhere out there, someone had killed 40,000 people and had not even bothered to say why. The United Nations met in emergency session. The session lasted 4 hours. At the end of it, every nation on Earth voted to dissolve the old government and replace it with something new. They called it the Earth Sovereignty Council. It had one purpose and one mandate written into its founding document in 6 words. This will never happen again. Park Ji-nu was elected as Speaker of the Council. He was a quiet man, a former diplomat who had spent 20 years negotiating trade deals and border agreements. He was not a soldier. He was not angry in the way that burns hot and fast. He was angry in the way that freezes and stays frozen. His first act was to send a formal message to the Velhari Dominion through the Okani Collective, a race of traders who served as middlemen for galactic communication. The message was polite. It asked for an explanation. It asked for accountability. It asked for dialogue. The Velhari response came back 2 weeks later. It was 1 line long. It said, "The matter is settled. Know your place." Jinnu read the response to the full council chamber. 600 representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their seats and listened. When he finished reading, the room was so quiet that people could hear the air moving through the vents. Jinnu folded the paper and set it on the podium. He looked out at the room and said 2 words, "Begin Aegis." Project Aegis was born that day. It was not a weapon. It was not a ship. It was a decision. The decision was simple. Earth would never again be weak enough for the galaxy to ignore. Yunari was 28 years old when they came for her. She was a quantum physicist working at a university in Daejeon, studying theoretical energy states that most of her colleagues considered useless. 2 men in dark suits walked into her lab on a Wednesday afternoon and told her that her country needed her. She laughed and said she was not that kind of scientist. They did not laugh. They handed her a folder. Inside was a photograph of Nova Incheon before the attack, full of life and light, and a photograph of it after, black and empty and dead. They told her she would have unlimited funding, unlimited staff, and 1 job. Build something that makes the galaxy afraid of Earth. She looked at the photographs for a long time. She closed the folder. And she walked out of her old life forever. That night, Admiral Do-hyun stood on the roof of the council building and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Velhari were sleeping peacefully, already forgetting the name of the colony they had burned. He reached into his pocket and felt the small red shoe that he still carried with him. He made a promise to the dark sky, not loud, not dramatic, just a whisper that no one heard. They would remember Earth. Earth went silent. Not slowly, not in pieces, but all at once, like a door closing. Every signal stopped. Every probe was recalled. Every ship came home. The Okani traders, who had been selling Earth basic star maps and communication equipment, sent messages asking if something was wrong. No one answered. After a few months, the galaxies stopped asking. The Velhari did not notice. Earth was a tiny blue dot on the edge of their maps, a Class 7 world, barely worth a footnote. They had destroyed the colony because it was convenient, the way a person might swat a fly near their food. They did not think about it again. The Elder Council had wars to plan, trade routes to control, and rebellions to crush in their outer systems. Humanity was forgotten before the year was over. But behind that silence, Earth was changing. Yunari moved into a facility built 300 meters underground in the mountains outside Daejeon. She brought 12,000 researchers with her. Physicists, engineers, mathematicians, biologists, and people from fields that did not have names yet. They worked in shifts. The lights never turned off. The coffee never stopped brewing. Nari herself slept 4 hours a night on a cot in her office, and spent the other 20 staring at equations that would have made her university professors weep. The first breakthrough came in year 3. Nari's team discovered that space was not just something you moved through. It was something you could cut. They called the technology the collapse drive. A normal engine pushed a ship forward. The collapse drive tore a hole in the fabric of space itself, and the ship fell through to the other side. A journey that would take the Velhari 6 months could be done in 11 minutes. The first test flight sent an unmanned probe from Earth to the far side of the galaxy and back in under an hour. Nari watched the data come in and did not smile. She just turned to the next project. The second breakthrough came in year 5. The Singularity Lance. It was a weapon that fired a compressed point of gravity so dense that it created a tiny black hole on impact. The black hole lasted only a fraction of a second, but in that fraction, it pulled everything within a kilometer into itself and crushed it into nothing. In testing, a single shot from a single ship erased an asteroid the size of a small city. Nari watched the test footage and felt sick. She went to the bathroom and threw up. Then she washed her face, went back to her desk, and started working on the targeting systems. The third breakthrough came in year 8. The veil. It was not invisibility. It was something stranger. The veil bent light, radiation, gravity waves, and every other form of detection around a ship the way water flows around a stone. A ship using the veil did not just become invisible. It became undetectable. It left no trace, no heat, no signal, no shadow. As far as the universe was concerned, the ship simply did not exist. While Nari built the weapons, the rest of Earth built the army. Kan Suji was 19 when she enrolled in the flight academy. She was the daughter of a factory worker from Ulsan who had lost an uncle on Nova Incheon. She was not the best student. She was not the most disciplined. She was, however, the most dangerous pilot anyone had ever seen. In simulations, she flew like someone who did not care whether she lived or died, except she always lived and her enemies always died. Her instructors were afraid of her, not because she was reckless, but because her recklessness worked every single time. Admiral Han Do-hyun visited the academy in year 6. He watched Suji fly a simulation that was supposed to be impossible. She beat it in 4 minutes. He watched her climb out of the simulator, crack her neck, and ask if there was anything harder. He promoted her to squadron leader that afternoon. Bae Taeho worked in a room with no windows. He was Do-hyun's oldest friend, a man who spoke little and noticed everything. His job was to learn everything about the Velhari without them knowing they were being watched. He launched micro-drones the size of dust particles into Velhari space. Over 10 years, those drones mapped every military base, every supply route, every patrol schedule, and every political argument inside the Dominion. Taeho knew which Velhari commanders were loyal and which ones were tired. He knew which border systems were ready to rebel. He knew the codes to their communication networks. He knew them better than they knew themselves. By year 15, Earth had built 300 warships. Each one carried collapse drives, singularity lances, and the veil. Each one was crewed by soldiers who had trained their entire adult lives for a single purpose. The fleet sat hidden in deep orbit behind Jupiter, dark and silent and waiting. Somewhere in the far reaches of the galaxy, the Dravine watched. They were the oldest species anyone knew of, ancient beings who did not fight or trade or build empires. They simply observed and recorded. One of their historians, a being who had watched civilizations rise and fall for 100,000 years, made a small note in their archive. It read, "The young species from the third planet has gone quiet. In our long experience, silence from the wounded is never a good sign." On a cold Tuesday night in the 15th year, Nari walked into Do-hyun's office. She looked 10 years older than she was. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were tired. She placed a small data chip on his desk and said, "It is ready, all of it." Do-hyun looked at the chip. He looked out the window at the stars that hung cold and bright over the mountains. He picked up the chip. Earth's silence was about to end. Admiral Han Do-hyun spent 3 weeks choosing the target. He did not want a city. He did not want a colony. He did not want civilians. He wanted something the Velhari considered unbreakable, so that when Earth broke it, the message would be clear. He chose Outpost Kisara. Kisara was a Velhari military station on the edge of Dominion space. It sat on a dead moon, surrounded by weapons platforms, shield generators, and a permanent garrison of 5,000 soldiers. The Velhari had built it 2 centuries ago as a forward base for their border wars. In all that time, no one had ever attacked it, because attacking Kisara was considered suicide. Its shields could absorb the combined firepower of 50 warships. Its weapons could destroy a fleet before it got within firing range. Military academies across the galaxy used Kasara as an example of perfect defensive design. Do-hyun chose it for exactly that reason. He briefed the fleet in the hangar bay of the flagship. 500 ships, 50,000 crew. They stood in silence as he spoke. He did not give a speech about glory or revenge. He said that they were going to show the galaxy what Earth had become, and that after today, no one would ever look at humanity and see something small. Kang Suji stood in the front row. She had not slept. She did not need to. She had waited her entire life for this day, and her blood was already running hot. When Do-hyun finished, she walked to her ship without a word. Her squadron of 12 pilots followed her. None of them spoke. They did not need to. The fleet activated the collapse drives at exactly midnight, Earth time. 300 ships tore holes in the fabric of space and fell through. They crossed 4,000 light-years in 11 minutes. When they arrived at Kesara, they were wrapped in the veil, invisible to every sensor the Velhari had. Suji's squadron decloaked first. 12 ships appeared directly above the outpost like ghosts stepping out of thin air. The Velhari sensors screamed. Alarms filled every corridor of the station. Soldiers ran to their posts. Commanders shouted orders. Shield generators powered up. Weapons platforms turned toward the sky. They were too slow. Suji gave one order. Fire. 12 singularity lances fired simultaneously. 12 points of compressed gravity struck the outpost and its surrounding defenses. For one heartbeat, everything was still. Then the gravity wells opened. The shields, the weapons platforms, the walls, the floors, the moon rock itself. Everything within range was pulled inward and crushed into points of light smaller than a grain of sand. Where Outpost Kesara had stood for 200 years, there was now empty space. Not rubble, not wreckage, nothing, as if it had never existed at all. The entire attack took 90 seconds. The Velhari border fleet responded within the hour. 150 warships jumped to Kesara's last known position, expecting to find a rogue attack force they could crush. Instead, they found Earth's full fleet waiting for them. 500 ships, uncloaked, hanging in perfect formation against the black of space. Every weapon powered, every shield raised, every pilot awake and ready. The Velhari commander stared at his sensor screen. His officers stared at theirs. No one spoke for a long time. The numbers on the screen did not make sense. These ships were faster, stronger, and more heavily armed than anything in the Velhari fleet. And there were 500 of them. Do-hyun opened a communication channel. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He transmitted a single data package, and he sent it not just to the Velhari fleet, but to every ship, every station, every relay, and every communication network in the entire galaxy. Every species with a receiver heard it at the same moment. The package contained 4 things. First, footage of Nova Inshan before the Velhari attack. Children playing, families eating, the 2 suns setting over green fields. Then, footage of Nova Inshan after. Black glass, silence, nothing. Second, the Velhari's response to Earth's request for justice. 1 line on a screen. The matter is settled. Know your place. Third, footage of Outpost Kesara's destruction. 90 seconds of the most heavily fortified military installation in Velhari space being erased from existence. Fourth, a star map. It showed Earth's fleet range using the collapse drive. The range covered the entire galaxy, every system, every homeworld, every capital. There was nowhere to hide. And at the bottom of the package, in every known language, 1 sentence. This is Earth. Attack us again and be destroyed. The Velhari border commander read the message. He looked at his sensor readings one more time. He looked at the 500 ships floating in silence before him. Then he gave an order that no Velhari commander had given in 300 years. Full retreat. His fleet turned and jumped away without firing a single shot. Across the galaxy, the message spread like fire. The Okani Collective, always quick to read the wind, sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth within 6 hours, requesting trade relations and a formal alliance. Park Jinu received the request. He waited 3 days before responding. 3 days of silence, the same silence the Velhari had given to the 40,000 dead of Nova Incheon. Then he accepted the meeting. On 100 different worlds, military leaders and politicians and scientists watched the footage of Kasara's destruction and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. Fear. Not the fear of a bully facing another bully. The fear of realizing that something you had ignored, something you had dismissed as small and weak and unimportant, had been watching you the entire time, and it had been building. The Dravim historian watched the message from a quiet room on a world older than most stars. The historian had seen empires rise and fall for longer than most species had existed. The historian opened the archive, found the entry for Earth, and deleted the old classification. In its place, the historian wrote a single new line. There is no existing category for this species. A new one has been created. Do-hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the Velhari fleet disappear into the dark. Neither of them smiled. There was nothing to smile about. This was not victory. Not yet. This was a warning, and warnings only work if the other side is smart enough to listen. Taeho said quietly, "They will come back." Do-hyun nodded. "I know." He looked at the empty space where Kesara had been, and thought of a red shoe melted into black glass. "Let them come," he said. The Velhari Elder Council argued for 40 days. The old ones, the ones who had ruled for centuries and had seen enough wars to know what losing looked like, urged caution. They had watched the footage of Kesara. They had read the sensor data. They understood what those numbers meant. But the young ones, the commanders who had built their careers on Velhari superiority, who had never known a galaxy that did not bow to them, refused to accept it. A Class 7 species had humiliated them. A species that had been making clay pots while the Velhari were building starfleets, had destroyed their greatest outpost in 90 seconds. The shame was unbearable. On the 41st day, the war faction won the vote. The decision was made. Earth would be punished. Not with a patrol fleet this time, not with 30 ships. The Velhari would assemble the largest military force in galactic history, and erase humanity from existence, the way they should have done 15 years ago. They called it the Grand Armada. 2,000 warships drawn from every corner of the Dominion. Battle cruisers the size of mountains. Carriers loaded with fighter wings. Destroyers built for speed and killing. It took 3 months to assemble. Supply lines stretched across 100 systems. Soldiers who had been stationed on peaceful border worlds were pulled to the front. The Velhari poured everything they had into this fleet, because they believed that overwhelming force was the answer to every question. Bei Taeho knew about the Armada before the last ship had even left dock. His microdrones, still scattered across Velhari space like invisible dust, captured every order, every supply manifest, every communication between commanders. He sat in his windowless room on Earth, and built a complete picture of the enemy's plan. He knew how many ships they had. He knew their formation. He knew their jump coordinates. He knew the name of the Velhari admiral commanding the fleet, a decorated officer named who had won 16 campaigns and never lost. Taeho brought the intelligence to Do-hyun on a rainy Thursday morning. He laid it out on the table without emotion. 2,000 ships, 3 months away. Target, Earth's solar system. Do-hyun studied the data for 1 hour. Then he called a meeting. Yunari, Kan Suji, Bei Taeho, and Park Jinu sat around a table in a small room deep inside the command center. No assistants, no recorders, just the 5 of them, and the weight of what was coming. Dohyun said they were not going to defend Earth. They were not going to hide behind their solar system and wait. They were going to meet the Velhari in open space, and they were going to win so completely that no species in the galaxy would ever think about attacking Earth again. Not in 100 years, not in 1,000, not ever. Nari asked how. Dohyun told them. The plan was simple. The Velhari Armada would need to stop at a staging point before making their final jump to Earth. Every fleet in history stopped to regroup before the final push. Taeho already knew the coordinates. Earth's fleet would be there first, cloaked under the veil, and they would be waiting. Suji smiled for the first time in weeks. The fleet moved out in silence. 500 warships activated their collapse drives and crossed the galaxy to a point in empty space 2 light-years from Earth's sun. They arrived 6 days before the Velhari. They spread out in a sphere formation, each ship cloaked and invisible, and they waited in the dark like wolves lying in tall grass. 6 days later, the Grand Armada arrived. 2,000 Velhari warships dropped out of their jump in a massive formation that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Their sensors showed empty space. Their commanders reported all clear. The Velhari admiral ordered a 6-hour rest before the final push to Earth. He never got those 6 hours. Dohyun gave the order. Every ship in Earth's fleet decloaked at the same moment. 500 warships appeared in a perfect sphere around the Armada, above them, below them, on every side. The Velhari were surrounded. Their sensors, which had shown nothing a second ago, now screamed with 500 contacts at point-blank range. Dohyun opened a channel to the Velhari admiral. His voice was calm and steady. "You were warned," he said. "You may surrender or you may die. You have 60 seconds. The Velhari admiral was not a coward. He was a proud officer who had served the Dominion his entire life. He looked at the sensor screen. He looked at the 500 ships around him. He knew what those weapons could do. He had seen Kesara, but he could not surrender. His honor would not allow it. His people would not allow it. 2,000 ships do not cross the galaxy to surrender. He ordered the attack. The Battle of the Threshold lasted 4 minutes. The Velhari fired everything they had: missiles, energy beams, plasma charges. Their weapons filled space with light. But Earth's ships used the veil to disappear and reappear at will, flickering in and out of existence like ghosts. The Velhari were shooting at shadows. Earth's singularity lances fired in coordinated waves. Each shot erased a warship. Each wave erased dozens. Suji's squadron moved through the Armada like a blade through water, striking, vanishing, striking again. She destroyed 40 ships in 4 minutes. Her hands were steady on the controls. Her breathing was even. Her face showed nothing. In 4 minutes, 1,400 Velhari ships were gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone. Erased from existence the way Nova Incheon had been erased. The remaining 600 ships stopped firing. Some dropped their shields. Some simply went dark. Their crews sat in silence, waiting for the end. The end did not come. Dohyun ordered a ceasefire. He opened a channel to the surviving ships and told them to stand down. He sent medical teams to ships with injured crew. He sent engineers to ships with failing life support. Not a single prisoner was harmed. Not a single surrendered crew was punished. When the surviving ships were stable, Dohyun sent them home. All of them, in their own ships, with full fuel and supplies. He sent them back to the Velhari homeworld with a second message for the Elder Council. "We could have killed them all. We chose not to. Do not make us choose again." That night, Suji sat alone in the cockpit of her ship in the dark hangar bay. The battle was over. They had won. She had waited her whole life for this. She had trained for it, dreamed about it, burned for it. She did not feel what she thought she would feel. Taeho found her there an hour later. He climbed up to the cockpit and sat in the empty seat beside her. He did not say anything. He did not ask if she was all right. He just sat there with her, in the silence, while the stars turned slowly outside the canopy. After a long time, Suji said, "I thought it would feel different." Taeho nodded. He understood. Victory built on graves never feels the way you imagine it will. They sat together until the lights came on. The Velhari Dominion broke apart in the months that followed. Border systems that had been held together by fear saw that the fear was gone and declared independence one by one, like stones falling from a crumbling wall. The Elder Council, which had ruled 200 star systems for longer than humanity had known fire, found itself governing a shrinking empire with an empty fleet and a population that no longer believed in its power. The commanders who had voted for war were removed. The ones who had urged caution took their places, but it was too late to hold things together. The Dominion was not destroyed by Earth. It was destroyed by the truth that Earth had revealed. The Velhari had never been as strong as they pretended. They had only been strong enough to bully those who were weaker. 3 months after the Battle of the Threshold, the Velhari sent an envoy to Earth. It was the first time in galactic history that a major power had sent diplomats to a Class 7 world. But Earth was not Class 7 anymore. Earth was something that the galaxy did not have a word for yet. Park Ji-nu met the envoy on the steps of the rebuilt United Assembly in Geneva. It was a spring morning. The cherry trees along the lake were blooming, and their petals drifted across the stone steps like pink snow. Ji-nu wore a simple dark suit. He carried no weapons. He brought no guards. He did not need them. The Velhari envoy was tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes that held the weight of a civilization's shame. The envoy bowed, which was something no Velhari had ever done to a human being before. Ji-nu bowed back. Then he invited the envoy inside. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. Ji-nu was not cruel. He did not humiliate the Velhari, or demand tribute, or territory. He wanted 4 things, and he would not accept fewer. First, the Velhari would formally acknowledge the destruction of Nova Incheon as an unprovoked act of aggression against a peaceful colony. Second, a memorial would be built on the site of Nova Incheon, maintained jointly by Earth and the Velhari, bearing the name of every person who died there. Third, all Velhari-controlled space would be open to free passage for every species. Fourth, the galaxy would establish a new governing body called the Galactic Compact, a framework where no single species could dominate, threaten, or erase another. The envoy agreed to 3 of the 4 terms immediately. The acknowledgement clause was the problem. Admitting that the destruction of Nova Incheon was unprovoked meant admitting that 40,000 deaths were not a military action but a massacre. It meant admitting guilt. The envoy hesitated. The envoy asked for time. Ji-nu leaned forward in his chair. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room the way cold water fills a glass. 40,000 people, he said. Farmers, engineers, teachers, children who had never heard of the Velhari Dominion. Children who were drawing pictures of alien flowers when your ships appeared in their sky. He paused. Say their names. Acknowledge what was done, or leave this building and do not come back. The room was silent for a very long time. The cherry blossoms drifted past the window. The envoy signed. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. The Okani Collective, always practical, became Earth's first formal ally. Trade routes opened. Technologies were shared. Species that had never spoken to each other found themselves sitting at the same table, because Earth had built a table big enough for everyone. Yun-Nari stepped down from Project Aegis. She had spent 15 years building weapons that could end worlds, and she was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. She told Do-hyun that she had done what was asked of her, and now she wanted to do something else. She renamed her division Project Horizon and turned its focus to exploration, terraforming, and building things instead of breaking them. The collapsed drive, which had been designed for war, became the engine that carried scientists to uncharted systems and settlers to new worlds. Nari said she did not build those weapons so they would be used forever. She built them so that someday they would not need to be used at all. Kang Suchi was offered the rank of fleet commander. She had earned it. She was the most decorated pilot in Earth's history, the woman who had led the first strike at Kessara and destroyed 40 ships at the threshold. Every admiral in the fleet wanted her. She turned them all down. She requested reassignment to the Nova Incheon Memorial Guard, a small ceremonial unit stationed on the rebuilt colony. Her commanding officer asked her why. She said that someone should always be standing there. Someone should always be watching that sky so that the people who live there now could watch their children play without looking up. Bei Teho became Earth's first galactic intelligence director. He built a network that stretched across the galaxy, not for war, but for warning. His job was to make sure that no species, human or otherwise, was ever caught by surprise the way Earth had been. He worked from a quiet office with no windows, the same way he always had. He spoke little. He noticed everything. When people asked him what kept him up at night, he said, "The things I have not found yet." Admiral Han Do-hyun retired. He left the fleet without ceremony, without speeches, without parades. He went home to Busan, to the land where his father had fished and his grandfather had farmed. The house was small and old, and the sea was the same sea that had been there since before humans learned to build boats. A reporter found him there one afternoon, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the waves. The reporter asked if he was proud of what he had built. Do-hyun thought about it for a while. He reached into his pocket and felt the small red shoe that he had carried for 17 years. He said, "I am proud of what we will not have to use." The Dravine, for the first time in 10,000 years, sent a representative to visit a younger species. The ancient historian traveled to Earth and met Jinu in the assembly hall in Geneva. The historian was impossibly old, with eyes that had watched stars being born. Jinu asked the historian what the Dravine had classified Earth as in their archives. The historian considered the question. Then the historian spoke, in a voice like wind moving through a very old forest. "We have watched millions of species across millions of years. We have seen the weak become strong and use their strength to dominate. We have seen the wounded become powerful and use their power for revenge. It is the oldest pattern in the universe. Suffer, rise, and make others suffer in turn." The historian paused. "Your species broke the pattern. You suffered. You rose. You built the power to burn the galaxy to ash. And then you chose not to. In all our records, across all of time, no one has done what you did." Jinu asked, "What do you call that?" The historian said, "Dangerous, merciful, unprecedented." Far away on the rebuilt moon of Nova Incheon, Kang Suji stood at her post as the two suns set over green fields where children were playing again. The memorial wall behind her held 40,000 names carved in stone that would last longer than the stars. And at the edge of the galaxy, on a deep space beacon that drifted in the dark between the stars, a message pulsed in every known language. It had been placed there by Earth, aimed outward, toward whatever lay beyond the edge of what was known. The message said, "You are not alone. You are not without protection. Welcome." The stars burned on, the galaxy turned, and Earth stood watch.